Shalom, welcome to my channel, The Hebrew Bible. This is Moses Gumadi, and in this video we'll talk about God making Moses a god unto Pharaoh. The Lord, Hashem, makes Moses a god to Pharaoh. Where is it written? It's written in the book of Exodus, Shemot, chapter 7, verses 1 and 2. But before that, I just want to tell you there are a couple of very interesting things coming up in this chapter, especially about the rod of Moses and the rod of Aaron, which are different, two different rods. Moses' rod turned into a serpent, we know that, but Aaron's rod did not turn into a serpent, it turned into something else, which I'm going to mention shortly. But let's begin with Exodus chapter 7, verses 1 and 2. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, and God said to Moses, Hashem said to Moses, Re'e natatika Elohim le Pharaoh. Look, I have made you as a God, as an Elohim to Pharaoh. Ve'aharon achicha yihye naviecha, and Aaron your brother shall be your prophet. Ata tedaber et kol asher atzavecha. So thou shalt speak all that I command. You should speak whatever I command you. And ve'aharon achicha yadaber el Paro, and Aaron shall speak the same thing to Pharaoh. So you have a hierarchy here. Ve'shillach et bnei Israel me'artzu, and then Pharaoh will send the children of Israel out of his land. So this is the way God is going to interact. Okay, now let's look at the further passages. Especially, I can't obviously read the whole chapter, but I want you to focus on a couple of things here. Let's look at what God said to Moses and Aaron in terms of turning the staff into a serpent. As it says, it shall become a serpent. Here, if you see, and the Lord spake unto Moses, right? So, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe ve'al Aharon lemor, and God spoke to Moses and Aaron and said, Ki yadaber elechem paro lemor tenu lachem mofet. So when you speak to Pharaoh, he will say, show a miracle, right? Ve'amarta, and you shall say, El Aharon kach et matecha. So when Pharaoh says that show us a miracle, you should say to Pharaoh, that is you should say to Aaron, Moses should say to Aaron, take your rod, kach et mateka, take your rod, vehashlek, and cast it, lifne Pharaoh, before Pharaoh, yehi letanin, and let it become a tannin. It is translated here in the King James as it shall become a serpent. It's not a serpent actually. If you see the word, it is tannin. Tannin is a dragon, or some people translate it as a crocodile, but it is certainly not the same thing that Moses' staff had turned into, which we are going to look at shortly. So look at here, Yehi le tannin, and it shall become a dragon, tannin. Now remember, a few chapters before, in the book of Exodus, chapter 4, verses 2 to 3, God at Mount Sinai, not Mount Sinai, wherever the burning bush, around there, thereabouts, where the burning bush incident took place, God told Moses that you cast down your staff and it shall become a snake, a serpent. And here we read, Vayomer hashlikehu arza, vayishlichehu arza, vayhi lenachash. So God said, cast it on the ground, and Moses cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and this serpent is Nachash. Nachash is the same Nachash that appears in Genesis chapter 3. It's the Nachash which came to Eve, Chava, and said, hey, did God really tell you this, etc. Okay, so that's the Nachash. But notice the difference between Tannin and the Nachash. God, in the scriptures in the Hebrew, doesn't use the same word. It deliberately tells the same two different words for the purpose of distinguishing between Aaron's rod and Moses' rod, which I'm going to talk about shortly. Now, so when God, coming back to chapter 7 in Exodus, right? So God told Aaron to Moses that Aaron should cast his staff and it will become a tannin. And then what happened later on? All the other guys, Vaishlihu ish matehu, everyone cast his mata, that is the rod or a staff. Vayihu letanninim. And when the Egyptians too, when they cast their rods, they also became dragons. Tanninim. Tanninim is the plural of tannin. So when Aaron cast his rod, it became a tannin. And the other things also became a tannin. And here we read that Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods. So that is all in the context of the rod turning into dragon, not a serpent, not a nachash, but a tannin. Okay. So what is the point? The point is Moses' staff turned into a serpent, which is a nachash, and Aaron's staff turned into dragon. Remember, now we're going to go back and tie this one into the first verse we read about Moses being a god to Pharaoh, Aaron being a prophet, etc. Hold on here. The point is, Moses has a staff, Aaron has a staff, both of them are not the same. This turned into serpent, that turned into dragon. Very clear. Now, if you read now, come a few verses down below, in the same Exodus chapter 15, God tells Moses very clearly, Lech el Paro, go to Pharaoh, baboker, in the morning, hinne yotze hammaima, he comes to the water. Vanitzva, vanitzavta, right? So, likratho. So what is he doing? And he goes up to the water, and thou shalt stand behind the brink, by the river's brink, as against he come, and the rod which was turned into a serpent thou shalt take. So what is happening? Al Shephat, that is a Shephat is the mouth of a high or, that's the brink of the river. Where Hammate, mate is the staff. Where Hammate asher nechfach lenachash. Take the rod which was turned into a serpent in your hand. Tikach beyadecha. Take it in your hand. Who is saying? God is saying to Moses, hey, Pharaoh is coming to the water in the morning. Go to him and take the rod which has turned into serpent. Means this is not the rod of, he's not talking about the rod of Aaron. He's telling very clearly, Moses, take your rod which turned into serpent. Okay? Right. Now go further. Couple of verses down. Ko amar Adonai bezot teda ki ani Adonai hinne anochi makke b'mate asher beyadi. Now this looks very interesting because it says, now thus saith the Lord, in this that thou shalt know that I am the Lord, ki ani Adonai, that I am the Lord, hinne, behold, anochi makke b'mate asher beyadi. I will smite with the rod that is in my hand. Who is saying this? Thus saith the Lord, Hashem, in this that thou shalt know that I am the Lord. So Moses has to say to Pharaoh, thus saith the Lord. And he will say, in this thou shalt know that I am the Lord. That is, he is speaking on behalf of God. Behold, I will smite with the rod that is in mine hand upon the waters, and then they will turn into blood. Now the point is this, that Moses has a rod, but he's using thus saith the Lord and says as though God is going to smite the waters with his rod in his hand. In his hand. Where is God there? There is no rod in the hand of God physically, but he says, I will smite with the rod that is in my hand, and says, I am the Lord. He says, I am the Lord. So what is happening is, in front of Pharaoh, Moses is standing with a rod, and he says, of course, in the name of God, he says, thus saith the Lord, and then he speaks in the first person as though the Lord himself is speaking. He says, I am the Lord. Behold, I will smite with the rod that is in my hand. So Pharaoh would understand it as, this is Moses going to hit, because that's what he would think. Now he's going to use the hit. So the rod that is in Moses' hand, it is as though it is God's rod. And when Moses touches it, it is as though God smites it. That's how one could understand. Okay, what did actually happen? So, but before that, so now look at this. The Lord's staff. Is there a Lord's staff? We have Moses' staff, Aaron's staff. Now let's see what happened actually. what happened actually is, we read in verse 17, we read, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, and God said to Moses, Emor el Aharon kach mateka. And here he says, tell Aaron to take his rod, and then stretch out thine hand upon the waters of Egypt, upon the streams, upon the rivers, etc., upon all their pools, that they may become blood. So, what is he saying? Tell Aaron, Emor el Aharon kach mateka, unte yadecha. So stretch your hand. Tell Aaron that you stretch your hand. So Aaron is going to take his rod and stretch it. And what happens? The water will turn into blood. In the previous chapter, God said, I will smite with the rod that is in my hand. There is no rod in God's hand. But Moses speaks as though it is God's staff. And Pharaoh would assume Moses is going to do it as though God does it. But then Moses tells Aaron, hey, take your staff and stretch it. And then what happened actually is written Exodus chapter 7 verse 20. Vaya asu chen Moshe ve'aharon. So here we read that Moses and Aaron did so. Kasher tziva Adonai vayarem bammate. Now this again is a wonderful language, because here you read, both of them did as the Lord has commanded. And Moses and Aaron did so. What did they do? Moses did as God had told to Moses to tell Aaron. He says, where is it? He says to Aaron, so say to Aaron. So Moses said, and then Aaron stretched as Moses would have had him. So both Moses and Aaron did so, as the Lord commanded. Vayarem bammate vayach. And he lifted up the rod and smote. So who lifted up the rod? It does, and Moses and Aaron did so as the Lord commanded. And he lifted up the rod. Who lifted up the rod? We would assume that Aaron would lift up the rod, right? So Aaron would lift up the rod. And then here, Aaron would lift up the rod. But basically, it is like the Lord lifting up the rod through Moses, and actually gets done by Aaron. So that's the thing that is happening here. There is a chain of the Lord, Moses, and Aaron. So essentially, what's happening is, this is what is happening. The Lord, Jehovah, Hashem, is God, and Moses is his prophet. We know that. But then Moses was appointed as an Elohim, God, to Pharaoh, and Aaron works like his prophet. And so, when God does things, he does through Moses, but Moses gets it done through Aaron as in a similar manner that God does gets the things done through Moses. Okay, that's what is happening. That's the meaning of. This is what really this kind of a thing explains what the Lord means. In Exodus chapter 3 verse 12 it says, Ehye imach, I will be with thee. Means God, Hashem, will be with Moses and carries out his works from heaven. And Moses is the visible representation. He does as though God himself does. And Aaron serves as a prophet to Moses, just exactly as Moses would serve as a prophet to God. So there's a chain of propagation of power from the ultimate source through Moses and gets done through Aaron, etc., to show how God operates in individuals. Okay, that's the point. So that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe to my channel. Click the bell icon and also do comment below, and I will see you again in the next video. Thank you very much.